Welcome back, everyone, to Module 1, the Beginner Foundations of our Photography Mastery Roadmap. In our last explainer, we laid out a massive truth bomb. Photography is really just about controlling light. It turns your camera into the ultimate eye. Today, we're taking the next crucial step with Lesson 2, how a camera works. If you've ever stared at a camera and just felt completely overwhelmed by it, don't worry. My goal today is to completely transform that confusing box of buttons into a simple, totally understandable tool. Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a great roadmap today. First, we'll look at the basic camera blueprint. Second, the window and curtains analogy. Third, how the pros use light. Fourth, avoiding beginner mistakes. And finally, your next practice steps. Let's get to it.
Section 1, the basic camera blueprint.
To really understand this blueprint, we have to anchor right back to what we learned in Lesson 1. Capturing an image is just controlling light. At its absolute core, no matter how fancy it looks, a camera is fundamentally just a light-tight box. I mean, that is true whether you're looking at some vintage wooden box camera from the 1900s or a massive $50,000 digital cinema rig they're using in Hollywood right now. When you strip away all the complicated software, they are literally just dark boxes designed to do exactly 3 things. And here is the magic rule of 3. Job number 1, let the light in. Job number 2, control exactly how long that light comes in. And job number 3, capture that light. That's the whole shebang. By chunking the camera's massive, overwhelming feature list into these 3 simple jobs, the mechanics instantly become so much more digestible, right?
Moving on to Section 2, the window and curtains.
Okay. Technical terms like aperture and shutter speed can sound like a totally foreign language when you're first starting out. The absolute best way to make them click is to map them to an everyday concept. So let's build an analogy together. Think of the camera's lens exactly like the glass of a window. Just like a window lets you see the world outside your house, the lens is the glass that gathers and focuses the incoming view into our dark box. Without the glass, well, there's no clear picture. Now, what's really interesting about this is what's inside that lens. There is a physical hole in there called the aperture, and it acts exactly like how wide you open the curtains on your window. Think about it. If you pull your living room curtains wide open, a massive volume of light just floods the room. But if you pull them mostly closed, leaving just a tiny sliver, only a tiny bit of light gets in. Next up is the shutter. So if the aperture is how wide the curtains are open, the shutter is the mechanism that controls exactly how long those curtains stay open. It's literally a tiny physical curtain sitting right in front of the sensor that snaps open and closed to control time. And finally, we have the sensor. To finish off our room analogy, this sensor is like a digital wall inside the room. When the light shines through the window glass and passes the curtains, it hits this wall. The sensor is covered in millions of tiny light-sensitive pixels that remember exactly how much light and what color hit them. That's how it turns light into a digital image. Let's move to our sequence and see how this builds together chronologically. Imagine a single beam of light traveling toward you. First, the lens focuses it. Second, it passes through the aperture opening. Third, the shutter opens to allow it to pass for a very specific amount of time. And fourth, bam, it strikes the sensor to be captured. That is the fundamental journey of light. And this brings us to a huge takeaway. Once you truly internalize this 4-step flow, every single setting on your camera is going to make sense. Why? Because you're just adjusting one part of a simple chain. You finally gain total control. It's no longer a confusing machine, it is a very straightforward light management tool. Section 3, how professionals use light. Now you might be wondering, okay, sure, this is a nice beginner analogy, but what do the pros actually do? Well, this exact basic foundation is what top-tier professionals manipulate every single day on the job. A professional sports photographer? They use an incredibly fast shutter, a super brief curtain open time, to freeze a footballer mid-kick. A wedding photographer? They rely on a really wide aperture, opening those curtains all the way up, to gather enough light in a dim church without needing to blind everyone with a flash. And an astrophotographer uses a very long shutter time to slowly gather enough dim starlight over many seconds to reveal the entire galaxy. It's literally all the same basic mechanics. Section 4, avoiding common beginner mistakes. When you haven't totally mastered this chain of light yet, it's super easy to fall into a few common traps. The first is misunderstanding sensor size. So the crucial point is that beginners often think sensor size doesn't matter, but it drastically impacts your images. A large sensor in a big DSLR camera has way more surface area to gather light than the tiny little sensor tucked inside your smartphone. That physical limitation is exactly why your phone photos in a dark, dim restaurant look like a grainy mess, while a pro camera captures the scene perfectly. Here's another big mistake: assuming that zooming in with your lens and physically walking closer to your subject are the same thing. No way. They absolutely aren't. They change the perspective in the image in totally different ways. Now, we will dive deep into optics and exactly why this happens in an upcoming lens lesson, but for now, just keep in mind that there is a major difference. Finally, and this is absolutely crucial, you must realize that the shutter and aperture have to work together. Think about it. If you change the size of the curtain opening, you naturally have to adjust how long it stays open if you want to let in the exact same amount of light, right? They are linked. This is a vital hint at something called the exposure triangle, which is exactly what we'll be tackling in our next few lessons. Section 5, your next practice steps. Okay, information is awesome, but we need to put this into action so this blueprint becomes second nature to you. So here is your practical exercise for today. Grab whatever camera you have around. Even if it's just the pro mode on your smartphone, that works. First, I just want you to locate the words aperture, shutter speed, and ISO in your menu. Don't change them, just find them. Second, put the camera on full auto and take a photo in a really bright room and then take another one in a very dim room. Finally, compare them side by side. Do you notice grain or blur in the dark photo? Just observe how the auto mode desperately tries to compensate for that lack of light. And I have a quick little homework assignment for you to really solidify your learning. I want you to write down a short 3 to 4 sentence paragraph explaining the journey of light from the lens to the final photo. But here's the catch. You have to explain it as if you are talking to a 10-year-old. Use only simple, everyday words. If you can explain it simply, it means you truly, deeply understand the mechanics. All right, to wrap things up, let's do a quick, rapid-fire quiz to mentally lock in what we've covered today. Question 1. What are the 3 main parts of a camera involved in taking a photo? Think back to that window and curtain analogy from earlier. Question 2. What do the aperture and the shutter actually do? Again, visualize that room. Which one dictates the width of the curtain opening, and which one is the clock timing how long those curtains are pulled back? Question 3. Why does a bigger sensor generally perform better in low light? And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we talked about regarding that massive DSLR sensor versus the tiny one tucked into the back of your phone. It all comes down to gathering capacity. Finally, question 4. If photography is truly just managing light, how are you going to choose to set your curtains next time you pick up a camera? Are you trying to freeze time, or are you trying to let the light flood in? Think about that carefully, because mastering those 2 choices is exactly what we are going to tackle next when we finally conquer the exposure triangle. Happy practicing, everyone, and I will see you in the next explainer.